You guys, I'm so glad to be back on live. I do think that once I get some iPhone storage, making actual videos, I do believe that that is going to help with reach. Because at this time, honey, I don't know how people are feeling about the live videos. How are you guys feeling about the live videos? I don't really have a choice, but I know it can be a bit of like, what's going on here? I'll just start by dumping off some random thoughts about culture and some things I've seen. Today, we are going to be talking just a little bit about education, the ongoing uproar and the outcry of educators in the Black community, but we're not actually going to be talking about it in terms of advocacy. We're actually going to be talking about it in terms of solutions. And I will be holding many of the content creators, and that's what I'm going to refer to them as, who've come online, oftentimes displaying hysteria in regards to young Black kids who can't read. So, I got a piece coming out on Medium, and I'm so excited. I haven't written anything in a very long time, and even still, when I write today, just because of my life time constraints, I don't write as long, right? But I'm so grateful to just kind of have be back in this space, right, where I'm writing, because I miss it. I miss it. And I do think that even in my own online use, right, social media, you have to really try to fight off, you know what I mean, the social engineering and how it rewires your brain, in our connection to literature. So it's a great practice. It's something I'm doing more intentionally these days, but also I love it. You guys know that. You guys know I love writing. My coffee has cooled and it's actually pretty good. So I'm currently reading White Space, Black Hood by Cheryl Cashin. Yes. And so far, so good. I literally just started the book, but I knew it was going to be good when I seen it. And I was like, I have to purchase this one. You guys know I have kind of separated myself from the online intellectual communities, book communities with African American content creators and, book recs, because I don't feel like the book recs are ever, I'm not going to say they aren't ever. I think some content creators are great at, being able to provide us with great literature, but a lot of the online social media stuff is incredibly performative, and I spoke about that in my last live, and it's really just a matter of like throwing out popular names. I hate that Roxane Gay, excuse me, caught a stray on my channel. But I just had to be very forthcoming about Bad Feminist. I mean, it was a terrible, terrible read, 78 pages in. And I'm like, this is absolute garbage. I refuse to sit and endure another 400 pages. And that's one of the things that I love about learning, especially as an independent learner, is that you can decide when a book is not good and put it down, right? I know right now we're kind of doing this thing where a lot of people feel as though if they read through a book, right, they must read through a book, or if they pick up a book and a lot of people love the book, then it must be a good book. And so I'm really big on just saying, hey, this is a learning environment. Still don't know what's going on with Nolan Wells. We had a child that was actually found murdered in a recent investigation here in my city. And it took the coroner's office less than 48 hours to come out and say what was the cause of death. And that is racism, ladies and gentlemen. That is the discrimination that we are talking about when we talk about Mississippi. It doesn't take that long to identify. I know they're saying it was a drowning, but even in this investigation, right, this child was quite literally mutilated by multiple individuals, and didn't really take long to figure out what happened to the child, right? The coroner's office, the autopsy, right? It wasn't removed, and parts were shuffled over here and parts were shuffled over there. So that's when we say racism, and we talk about systemic discrimination, and how processes are not in place to protect African American people, how we have to continuously endure, right, and continuously advocate for our communities, because we do not get treated fairly, and we do not experience the same level of justice. Now, obviously, I'm not in Mississippi, but I think you get the point. So there's that. I do think that in terms of social media and advocacy, I think it's a great place. I think that, the family should continue to talk about it, to continue to say his name. I know they're probably weary. I don't think that many of us have really sat with the reality that this is a family who will never see their child again. We've got, up and coming semesters are here. We've got holidays approaching. and this family, their life will forever be changed. And we know that, Black death, and we know that, children, and just all of it is, it's nothing new, right, under the sun, but it is something that garnered national attention. And I just think overall, my condolences to the family, because that is just, I couldn't imagine, you know what I mean? And so I think sometimes we forget the humanity of it. I know a lot of times we try to disassociate ourselves from these stories because we just don't want to kind of carry the trauma. But I am someone who has the capacity, and I know there are other people are as well. And so it's very sad. Interestingly, what's going on with the Carmelo Anthony case, another great example of injustice, and just how the system will go above and beyond, right? This racist system will go above and beyond to ensure that certain positions of power stay in place, right? So just another unfortunate situation. So anyway, I'm just going to go ahead and get into what it is that I wanted to come on and talk to you guys about today. And that is addressing the conversations around literacy. So I believe his name was Darius. I'm sorry, I do not know the last name. We'll call him Mr. Darius because he was an older gentleman who made a video. I didn't watch the video because I've seen, quite frankly, too many. I've seen too many Black educators sit in spaces and talk about the Black youth in such a way that is just, at this point, to me, I think it's a little tone deaf. If you are more than likely one of the only, one in maybe, I don't even know, you say maybe two faculty, depending on where you are, you know that the representation is not there. You know that children, or at least you should know, that Black children feel a lot comfortable in learning environments when they see African-American teachers and professors, right? And so I just think to continue to come online, blaming parents, not addressing the realities of our systemic the systemic racism, right, in these institutions that are so deliberate in ensuring that African-American people stay at the bottom so that they can have white affluence, right, and build white wealth and have these proceed, like all the money is being funded to the private institutions, to the predominantly white schools, right, in these neighborhoods. I don't know why we're still blaming Black children. I don't know why we're still coming online hysteric, right? I think it should get to a point where if you're not actively willing to do something about it, then just shut up, respectfully, right? I think at this point we need to just shut up. I don't know what it is about social media, and I'm not talking about Mr. Darius because this is a grown man. I know nowadays videos just be all over the place. So I'm not trying to, I'm not coming down on this man. I'm talking about a lot of educators who've come online with this same type of approach. And it's really emotional and it's impulsive, right? Can you imagine these kids seeing you make this video? Because that's where we are today, right? Your students, right? Middle school students, sometimes even elementary students, right? They all have access to the internet, right? Many of them can actually come online and see you talking about them in this way. And I didn't watch the full video to say whether or not it was insensitive. I'm just more so talking about the entire conversation around Black kids and literacy and how overall it is incredibly insensitive, especially when you're talking about Black children who quite literally do not have the resources. They don't have the resources, you guys. And for everyone who sits online, right? And one of the things I always credit Bell Hooks. You guys know that's one of my favorite African-American philosophers. But Bell Hooks talks about this in her book. She says when Black people started garnering educational opportunities for higher ed, right? Those who went to college started coming back to the community and teasing those who were uneducated. They were saying things like, that's why you're dumb. And do we not see that same type of relationship today, right? The way I feel is that if you are an African-American person, you have been privileged to go to a good school, okay? One in which you were actually taught reading and writing, one in which your professors were proficient in teaching, because I also think that this is something I'm seeing on the internet as well. Not everybody is a good teacher. Not everybody can articulate themselves in a way that is clear and concise. Not everybody can relay complex information. And furthermore, when you're talking about education and literacy, do you guys understand how much goes into that, right? When you talk about the qualifications to be a teacher, you're talking about understanding of phonomics, right? You're talking about understanding third grade, kindergarten levels. Like, there is so much that goes into being a teacher and just teaching people and teaching people how to read. I don't think that many of us are actually willing to take the time to do that, right? And I know you're not taking the time to do that. One, because you don't have the qualifications. You too probably are struggling with literacy on to some degree, right? I know for myself, and this is why I'm always going to carry myself with intellectual humility, and I encourage many people to do the same, especially African American people. Excuse me. Coffee break. I was getting excited. It's because I had to basically teach myself how to read in terms of like college level, right? In terms of advanced material. Do you understand what I'm saying? I think for my AP English class, the only book we read was, I think, well, there was a few books, right? It was mostly white literature, which I was incredibly disinterested, right? It was Hamlet, Romeo and Juliet, and I think there was another one, but nonetheless, all not very interesting novels. And so that is the environment in which so many of us grow up in, right? Do you guys remember gifted programs? Yeah, gifted programs were removed. AP classes were then integrated, and you know who were in the AP classes? The white students. Likely the white students whose parents were part of, some type of org, whose parents were alumni, you know what I mean? So with that being said, that meant that there wasn't a lot of room for other Black kids to be in AP classes. And even with AP classes, it still was not this very like rigorous, you know what I mean? It wasn't this type of material. A lot of times we were in there chatting, talking, right? It was a very comfortable environment. And if I'm being honest, in my school, I really feel as though AP was really just a safe place. It was a haven for the white kids because we only had like 12 white kids in the whole school. You know what I mean? It was like a haven for them to be shielded. I remember watching the white girl who was incredibly racist. I remember I would watch her get all these types of privileges, right? She was never in class. She was, you know what I mean? And it's like you have this ease in regards to material that is across the board, right? That's what I'm saying. And so it's very easy to excel, right? We're talking about public schools. And so I just think so often we have these conversations and we're talking about Black kids, and I don't like the language that we're using. I don't like the hysteria that is around literacy when we have quite literally had to fight to be integrated in the library. Right? We were not getting funded. The Andrew Carnegie grants that went out, we were not getting funding for our own libraries. We had to garner support from community members. We were being placed in basements, right? And even when we did, galvanize and get the support to be able to use our library cards, right? This is the 40s and 50s. We still made do with that, right? And we had an understanding that we were to teach one another. And so I think the reality is that people are jaded. I think people are tired. I think that, I don't want to say capitalism because I don't think it's more so capitalism, but I do think certain desires for authority and fame and maybe even, popularity, right? Coming online, sharing these type of videos. I think that that's at the forefront versus genuinely wanting to see Black kids literate. I feel like the motives these days, under this political climate, under these current times, right, these perilous times, I think that the motives are really, really messed up with a lot of African American people who are in higher ed, the teachers, the faculty members, the entrepreneurs, right, those who are holding degrees from prestigious institutions. Like, I think overall, there is a need for maybe popularity. There is a need for some type of admiration, but I don't think that the needs rest on the Black community, right? And we know that for the longest of time, and even still continuously, right? Like the priority is that we integrate ourselves into white spaces and get equal access to opportunity. It is not that we uplift other African American people, right? Like that is not our priority. You know what I mean? So I think it's one of those things in which if you are going to come online and fix yourself to say something about African American children that you're working with deliberately, right? I think at the very least, many people who are in the comments who are also saying these things, blaming the parents, I think it's time for you to start to organize in your community and teach Black kids how to read. And if you can't accept that challenge, right, then I think we can also start having a conversation about equal access to education, right, to get certifications, to get qualified to actually be a teacher, because you have to understand it's so much more than just words, right? You're talking about comprehension. You're talking about what is age appropriate. It's a whole skill that goes into learning. Like learning in and of itself is a skill. And then you start to talk about what type of material is appropriate. right? What type of material would be needed to encourage these kids to read and eventually get to a place where they are reading books from doctors and they are reading, you know what I mean, academic material that is a little bit more coarse, right? But I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we're there. And quite frankly, I think that we have an interest in humiliation. I think that we have an interest in being seen as like the only one who can read, right? I said this before, like I don't really get what everyone is trying to prove by saying you guys don't think critically. Nobody thinks critically anymore. You know, everybody is so this. People are so dumb. Like, what's up with that? I never understood that language. I've never used that language on this channel. I never had to. I don't have to. If somebody doesn't understand what I'm saying, if I'm going to sit here and say, oh, I'm reading books and I'm just sharing things that interest me, that is a little bit more general. And I've kept my channel that way intentionally. But I think at the very least, I owe my community and the people who are listening to me under the sound of my voice explanation, right? I didn't post the video. It was a podcast actually. I didn't share it, but basically there was a video with Amanda Seales, and you know, if you know Amanda Seales, you know Amanda Seales, her work, you know, she was sharing something about like geopolitics, right? She was talking about the war in Israel and how it was connected to Gary, Indiana. She was talking about a deal that the governor made with Israel in regards to data centers or something of that sort. And she basically was advocating that African American people start to prioritize other communities as well. And people were in the comments and they were like, hey, you know, I think Black people need to focus on Black people's stuff. You know what I mean? Like, we need to worry about ourselves. That's why we're in the situation that we're in. And these arguments are relevant, right? Are they not? We kind of seen this with the hijacking of oppression, right? Just within the last couple of years, racism has got a whole new definition. They took woke and they made it something completely different, right? BLM was laughed at. You know what I mean? So it's like, I think that there's some truth to what people are saying. There's some relevance to what people are, you know, concerned about. And she took her to herself to make a follow-up video and basically saying that people were dumb. She said, if you think this way, you're dumb, you're ignorant. And I said, well, you know, instead of calling people stupid, why not take the time to explain what it is that you're saying? I mean, if you're cross-referencing, you know what I mean, Israel and Gary, Indiana, right? Individuals being without power. You know what I mean? I think that calls for some context, does it not? You know what I mean? And I feel like to be an educator, to be someone who has such a large platform, where is the intellectual humility? And my only guess, my only assumption, my only pushback is that you don't understand it either. You know what I mean? Does it feel good to be someone who just knows a very small, you know what I mean? Like, does it feel good to be someone who says like, I know this little thing that nobody else knows, and y'all are just dumb. Like, does that feel good? Is that ego stroking? I think so much of education for African American people has been about ego stroking. It has not been about educating those who are under us. It has not been about giving back. It has not been about, you know, sharing the information, right? We quite literally become gatekeepers of knowledge, quite literally. And so I don't know. I mean, there's history. There's so much that goes back at, you know, in terms of why we are the way we are, why literacy is the way that it is. Yes, it's systemic, but it also has something to do with some of the leaders that we've had before, right? To my understanding, Du Bois spoke about, you know, we should go to college, we should get degrees, we should, you know, there's enlightenment in knowledge and all these different things. And then Booker T. Washington was like, no, we need to get trades. And even still, fast forward today, and you see Black commentators, content creators who have these large platforms who sit online and they're like, y'all need to go get a trade. You know what I mean? So it's like, I'm not going to say it's not been a priority, but what I will say is that at the forefront, survival has been a priority for African American people. I don't think people realize the privilege in being able to sit down and read a book and being able to sit down and read some dense material and being able to sit down and read nonfiction. When you're already dealing with the injustices of the world, when you're already dealing with the crises of the world, when you're already dealing with your day-to-day survival, if you got kids, your responsibilities, your life, like, I don't think people realize, like, that's not something that a lot of people are doing. Quite frankly, a lot of people aren't doing that. And that doesn't mean that there's a fault on them. That's just the reality of the world. You know what I mean? So I think sometimes we get online in these intellectual communities and we're just very unrealistic, very egotistical. And, you know, for a lot of Black academics and scholars, not all, but for a lot who kind of have this notion of, you know, get it on your own. It's up to the parents, you know, a lot of this self-hating these self-hating beliefs. I think, unfortunately, it isn't until you're reminded that you are African American that you start to care. Right? It's not until, police brutality or injustice, rather, in whichever form that it may take, shows up at your doorstep to remind you, right, of the system in which we're living in, right, the administration in which we're under, that has given rise to overt racism, that has given rise to an uprising and modern day lynchings. Okay, like I don't think it's until it's your family, right, that when you experience injustice, and now you have to go on a whole press tour to bring about justice for your child, that you care, right? And that's just what it is. So it's everybody's responsibility to educate. I don't care how you do it. You see it? Listen, I know for me, I have a responsibility to educate, right? I also know that there is a education in education. I also know that I can't go out and be like, yeah, I'm going to teach these kids, blah, 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 because to an extent, like there's an education in education, right? Like, there are certain, like I said, grade levels, understanding, right? Like it's a whole lot that goes into that. But I also know that if I'm very concerned about the literacy rates, I'm going to try. I'm going to go do something, right? So I think there does get to a point where I also feel like we should start hearing more from people who are actually in the spaces and doing the work. And I think if you are in the spaces and you're doing the work and you find yourself coming online, historic, in a moment of emotional distress, right? Maybe you're frustrated. Maybe you're trying to get this kid to sound it out and they can't sign it out. And you decide to take that as an opportunity to come online and garner support. I think if anything, the message needs to be, hey, join me in what it is that I'm doing. This is important, right? And I think if anything, that to me just shows you're demonstrating a level of helplessness when it's not that deep, right? Literacy is not something in which people are helpless. And that is my message for a lot of African American people, young people under the sound of my voice as well. You're not helpless. If you can't read certain material, it's not the end of the world. This is a skill. When I first went to college at 17, I was studying biology, right? And I went a few hours away from home. It was just me. I didn't have like big family or, anybody to sit down with me and go over all of this stuff, right? I'm out here getting it out the mud, okay? And I had to get a job. It was just crazy, right? Here I am, full-time biology major, pre-med, right? I'll never forget, my white advisor told me, you're not getting into med school with these grades. Like you're getting C's, you're not going to make it. What I heard was you're dumb. And what the university, the PWI that I went to, what it communicated was you're not actually capable of doing this anyway, right? And so dropped out, went to a university that was local, just didn't feel worthy, right? I'm only Black kid typically in my classes, like, you know what I mean? We're doing chem, like, and looking back, hindsight, it was never a lack of capacity, right? It was a lack of skill, right? To some extent, I didn't have the discipline. To some extent, I didn't have the communal support rallying behind me. And I think that's another thing that for many scholars, we can all attest to, right? Many academics we can all attest to. Those of us who love learning don't typically have a lot of, community around us. I think what we're seeing online is great in some ways, but flawed in others, right? Typically within the Black community, it's usually something in regards to entertainment, in regards to fashion. And that's really just because it's an easier form to understand, but also historically, African American people have very rich history in arts. So it's not just to say, and I'm not saying that, oh, we just love entertainment. That's not what I'm saying. I'm actually saying that, we just have that connection to arts and entertainment. That's just what it is. We're typically very gifted. We come from, a lot of communities where, we are pushed into hoods and we are pushed into deprivation. And so that breeds a level of, well, let me not say breed. That is a byproduct of a level of creativity that you don't typically find in white communities. That's just what it is. So, and so I ended up, sticking with bio for like another year, dropped out, and I started studying organizational leadership, and I realized that this was a dud. I'm like, I don't, but my thought process was, okay, hey, I can at least go to school, do HR, make a decent amount of money. You know what I mean? But I'm like, I don't really want to do this. I had a class that was called like business writing. And the first day we went over how to write an email, and I was just totally disinterested. And I'm like, I don't want to, because at the time I'm also getting older and I'm realizing like, I took out a lot of loans, and I'm like, okay, I don't think I want to spend any more money me, if this is what I'm going to be learning. Because at the time I was already writing, I had started a blog, and I kind of stuck with my journey in terms of like journalism, but I didn't know what was possible. I'm in a very, red state, so to speak. And so, I didn't really see that. I didn't see that in my future. I didn't know how that was going to come to pass. And so anyway, dropped out, started a blog, published a book, kind of went on an entrepreneurial like endeavor, to pursue my dreams to be a writer. And I always say that it was one of those things to where, you aim for the moon and you land among the stars, I'm very proud of the things that I was able to do, just with the laptop that I had and the dreams that I had and the thoughts that I had and the love for learning that I had. But it wasn't anything that would have been like, I don't want to say widely accepted, but it wasn't impressive by and large, right? I didn't have, I wasn't reading nonfiction at the time. I was actually just reading books on self-help and spirituality and, books that were easy to digest, but more so centered on personal development, right? And so did that for a while, built up my strength in reading, right? Built up my strength in comprehension, started listening to a plethora of podcasts. What started off as personal development kind of shifted into, just learning about the world, being curious about who I was as an African-American woman, being curious about my family, being curious about, where we come from, right? And so that really just, like I said, my knowledge over the years was compounded just by independent study, just by learning and hearing and listening to books and watching videos and, interviews and all these different things. And so I say all that to say, I too, didn't come from the most prestigious institution. I didn't come from a family of, individuals who have college degrees or who have degrees in education, right? And many of us don't. So I would never sit in front of Black children and look at them as if they're helpless, right? And if you feel like the work is too much, because I think I'm wrapping up now, but this is the crux of it, right? A lot of y'all don't actually want to do the work. You don't want to do the laborious work of teaching people how to read. You don't want to do the laborious work of organizing. You don't want to do the laborious work of, if you're going to talk about politics, are you out actively educating people? You can go to the mall. You can talk about what politicians are what. Here's a breakdown of what they've been doing. Here's, and you don't have to say, hey, I want you to vote Democrat. Hey, no, you can just say, hey, here are the candidates. I've done the research because I do political content and I care so much, right? I must care so much because I do political content, right? I'm going to do a breakdown. Here are 2 pamphlets of the main candidates running for blah, 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 right? This is how this is what they've done. This is how they say they're going to make a difference. The choice is yours. Right? Is that so hard to do? No, that's not hard to do, but that's also labor. That's real labor. And it's easier to come online, punch down on people, right? Parade yourself as the intellectual, the baddest in the game, versus to get out and actually do something. Notice how the solutions I just gave are so simple. So simple. So simple. I left a comment on a video not too long ago from another content creator. And I asked her whether or not, so much of what we're experiencing today is just a lack of political education, right? And someone said that was a great question, and shout out to them because y'all know I love a question. I love a question. I'm always going to get understanding. I'm not ever going to stay in a space where I do not understand what's going on. Give me a moment. I'm going to drink my coffee. Yeah. The comment, hey, wifey, that's cute. So that was a great question. And that's the reality. When you get up into academic spaces, especially when we start talking about politics, the jargon is very intentional. It's very intentional. I do believe that like in the 1800s, right, a lot of these white scholars, white doctors and so forth, they were very adamant on ensuring that the jargon was not one in which you would understand. That was deliberate. Can you fathom that? And that's why for me, it's not about a lack of rigor. It's not about not desiring rigor. It's about the fact that this jargon within this Western world was created intentionally to deceive, was created intentionally to be so incredibly difficult to decipher, right? Because it was used as a form of manipulation. That's how we get contracts. That is how Native Americans got tricked out of their land, right? Like that documentation for Europeans was a means to exploit the illiterate. And they did it intentionally by creating jargon that was so hard to parse through. You could not get through it you couldn't get through it. You couldn't get through it with a fine tooth comb. Couldn't get through it. Needle in a haystack. So I just think if you understand the material, if you understand history, if you genuinely care about improving the lives of young children, if you care about improving your community, then at the very least, you can actually get out and do something about it. I don't think people realize how little Black children are poured into, right? I don't think we realize how little they are nurtured. The conversation can't continuously be it's on the parents. The parents are just as helpless and powerless. I don't know if this year has taught Black people anything, but it is that our freedom is something that has to be fought for, taken by force. It is not going to be given. It is not going to be, we are not free, quite literally, at any given point in time, right? Our entire lives can be unraveled. And everyone talks about Assata Shakur, right? Everyone loves to talk about that book. One thing in that book that she said that spoke to me was that Black people are the only people who don't have control over their futures. And that's another reason why I'm so like heavy on criticism in regards to these intellectual communities, because y'all not talking about nothing. You want to keep flipping up books and whoop-de-whoop-de-whoop, but y'all not talking about nothing. Talk about what's in the literature. Talk about what they said, what they've done, what the book is actually about, and how it's changed your life. Like that's what the thing that makes me upset, because now I'm getting upset. But it's because it's like there's so much performance. There's so much performance up in these academic and intellectual spaces. Like, are we reading or are we not reading? Are we here to help, or are we here to just be heard? Because I don't understand. Y'all be quoting some of the most profound books, some of the most, Assata Shakur, you talking about one of the most, you know what I mean, profound Black leaders of the time. Like, I don't get it. I don't get it. And then y'all come online, y'all don't have nothing to say about the book. It's very general. It's very neutral. Nothing about the book was neutral. Everything about the book was enlightening. It's just, oh, these are the books I read. You didn't read that. No, you didn't. I know you didn't read it. Because let me tell you something what reading does. Reading, one, first of all, like I said, I just gave y'all my whole background. There's going to be intellectual humility. There's also going to be, if you genuinely love learning, right? If you're really here doing this work and you're in these spaces because you genuinely love learning, you understand how powerful it is to teach Black people the same things that you learn. You understand how powerful it is to know things, right? Like so many of us are without knowledge. That's even in the Bible. The Bible says, my people perish for lack of knowledge. So like I said, whether you're on the sphere of academia, whether you're on the side of, you know, politics, like you have a responsibility as an African-American person. And I can tell you right now, it's not getting online, flapping your jaws, calling people illiterate, talking about the Black youth. Like, no, you're going to get out in the world and do something, or you're going to shut up. And I'm standing on that. You know what I mean? I'm standing on that. Y'all know I'm not for violence, but the way y'all be on here acting, it's like, listen, you're either going to do something or you're going to shut up. Seriously. I'm going to report your page, because it just gets to a point. Like, it just gets to a point. So I don't know what it is that you want to see, but I think so many of us, somewhere along the way, we believe that we can't change our communities. We believe that we can't change anything about what's going on that we're seeing in the world. And I've never been that type of person. When I first started my nonprofit, oh my God, I was so in over my head. The vision was enormous. The resources were few, but I didn't let that stop me, because I believed in what it was that I was doing. Because I believed that I could help young girls. I believed that, hey, I had something that I could give, right? I believed that, okay, I made it through what they might be going through. You know what I mean? I don't have all of the degrees and certifications and all things, but I can do something. And that's the problem. And we're at this point now. And that's why I was saying with the Shanae Bryant, whatever her name is, not really getting into grifters, not getting into any of that. I'm talking about on a larger scale, African-American people have always been without credentials, oftentimes, right, in regards to community work and being able to help facilitate certain programs and all the things. You know, I don't know too much about the biographies of the Black Panthers, but I'm pretty sure they weren't checking to see who had this degree, who had that degree, who had this and that. It was pretty much, hey, listen, what can you do? How can you help? You know what I mean? Are you willing to help? Are you willing to devote yourself to the betterment for the betterment of the community, for the betterment of Black youth? And that's what I don't get today. We so busy arguing over for what? For what? Who are you trying to impress? Because white people are not impressed. Quite frankly, it's not enough. Quite frankly, it's not enough, and it's never going to be enough, and they don't care. Don't care. And most of the people who around you as an African American, you know you're the first in your family, they don't care either. So you might as well, hey, find your esteem in other places. That's all I'm saying. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. But I think it's time to find our esteem in other places, in other avenues, and perhaps being a kind person, and perhaps being a person of integrity who doesn't come online in a moment of, frustration, okay, in a moment of impulsivity. Record on your phone after walking away from working with Black children and saying, oh my God, oh my God. Well, like, yeah, that's why you're there, right? You're there to teach, right? And obviously we can only learn from people who are in these spaces. So let's not come to, I'm not being too hard on them, right? It's like we all learn, we can all learn from each other's mistakes, but I need you to know this was a mistake. This was a mistake. This was absolutely a mistake. Reading is not, I'm telling you right now, you don't need a doctorate to learn how to read. Okay. You don't need a doctorate to teach people how to read, but you do need to understand the complexities of the English language. Okay. You do need to understand that there is an education in education. Okay. And if you're going to be in these spaces, if you're privileged enough to be in these spaces, you've garnered the certificates, you've got the trust of faculty in these institutions, and at the very least, you can show up. You can show up and you can shut up, quite frankly. Because what is the solution? Oh, the parents. Oh, yes, it's always back on the parents. No, it's not on the parents. They got 5 kids. You ain't got no kids. You have no kids. You have nothing but time. So shut up. Do the work or don't do the work. But I think we need to get to a place where we kind of start to, be a little bit more, honest about the critique. Because I need you to know, if we don't care, nobody else cares. I don't know if you guys realize it or not, but I don't know too many other Americans, okay, immigrants that are riding for the Black people, that are riding for the African American community. I don't know too many. Miss Rachel, she's trying to do her thing, but honey, even with that, I still give side eye, but I love Miss Rachel down. She teaches my children. And my children, she teaches my, and I love that, right? She teaches the kids, she's here for it. But you never hear Miss Rachel saying, oh my God, these kids are so dumb. Well, I mean, she might off camera, but you know what? I'm not going to tarnish her reputation because I actually like Miss Rachel and what she's been able to do. And so if you're not willing to partake in the movement of labor and actually doing something, just shut up. Because I don't think that that's what we want to do. It's so easy to get on here and make a video. You know how easy this was? This was so easy. But to actually sit and build a relationship with young Black kids, and that takes time, you know what I mean? Because you have to build trust, right? Like any other relationship. And to get to a place where you want to actually mentor them and how you carry yourself, first and foremost, you need to be disciplined enough to show up in a way. You need to be disciplined in a way that you can show up and be a person of respect, okay, as an adult, you know what I mean? So I don't know. I think you're talking about some real labor. I think you're talking about some real life, do the work type of stuff. And it's just easier to get online and make a video. Even if you do have good videos. Y'all know me. I don't do the thumbnails. I'm not doing all that. At least not right now. And I don't know if I ever will, because I don't think I want that level of reach. You know what I mean? I think I want to be impactful. But most importantly, I think I'm here to share my thoughts and help whoever I can. You know what I mean? And if anything, create a community for people who are having the same thoughts, or at least, ignite something in the people that are watching my channel. But I'm not really here to be a content creator. I think about my life, and that's never been on my vision board. And that's one thing too I always say when we talk about dreams and social media, and I'm kind of going off on the deep end here, but like, did you ever really want to do this? You know what I mean? Like, for me, being a content creator was never on my vision board. I have never once in my life said I want to be a YouTuber. That's never been on my vision board. You know what I mean? So I'm not going to go as hard, you know what I mean? Because I never said I want, you know what I mean? But I am a person who has thoughts, and I am a person who cares, and I am a person who I feel like people can benefit from what it is that I have to say, right? I wouldn't be here if I didn't have anything to say. And you guys know that clearly. Look at me. I'm on here 40 minutes rambling. You know what I mean? But at least it's something you can get something from. You know what I mean? So all I'm saying is fix your attitude. Yeah, fix your attitude. That's let me be the mama of the bunch. Come in here and get y'all in the group and say, fix your attitude. I don't like your attitude. If you don't want to be here to help, then just go home. You don't have to be here. But I get the feeling that you do probably need to be here because you got your degree and everything, and you need some money, right? You know what I mean? Because if you didn't need any money, you probably wouldn't be here. So if you don't want to do the work of helping Black kids, if you don't want to do the work of really partaking in your community to help African American people during such a, precarious time, then shut up. You don't have to get online and do this. You can do something else. Everybody else is talking about fashion, cars, clothes, shoes. Just join the movement. In fact, there's a community, Earn Your Leisure. Go over there with them where y'all can sit and come up with Ponzi schemes, quite frankly. So that's all I got for today. I hope you guys got something from this. I enjoyed doing this, quite frankly. I think that this was helpful. I think that if can I just say this too? Because y'all know I love me some Barack Obama. Well, let me not too much now. I really admire Barack Obama, right? I just think that Obama is such a amazing leader. You know what I mean? And if you need aspiration, be like that. Be like Obama. You know what I mean? That's how people should. You know what I mean? That's a great model to follow. I think he's left a really great blueprint for many people to, you know, if you want to garner respect and, you know what I mean, authority, do that. Do that. Don't be like the pastors. Don't be like the pastors. Don't be like the ministers who just are here because really what they want is a platform. They want authority. They want to feel a sense of importance, and they won't get that in the world because they typically, discourage secularism. So they don't encourage education on average. They encourage their institution. And so within that, and it's not really a lot of wiggle room for you to garner, the level of admiration that you're seeking, which would come naturally through accomplishments, right? But if you are someone who shies away from accomplishments and you just want power and authority without, quite frankly, anything else, then yeah. So I'm going to go now. This was fun. I could talk forever. No one came on this morning. So you guys will catch the replay. But this was great. Be better.